I want to do an Ironman in 14 weeks. Can you help me? I've never done one before. If you know us and you know this podcast, you know that question is like nails on a chalkboard. This was the question that Mitch asked us last year in August, as he had started training for the Busso Ironman in December. And in today's case study episode, we're going to take you through why, despite our preferences, we decided to help Mitch to his first Ironman and what happened over the next 14 weeks to make it possible. So firstly, Dad, we get this kind of application. Why do you agree to bring him on when he is potentially a walking red flag for us?
Great question, Jordy. I'm looking forward to letting the listeners hear about a really different approach to getting prepared for your biggest event that you're going to do in quite a while. If you've never been really involved much in triathlon and never done a half, and here you are wanting to do a full Ironman, and that takes pretty gutsy, confident, or I don't even know what the word is, disregard for your own health and well-being. And it's a question that we get asked a lot is it enough time? And we always say there's never enough time for this. You give yourself the most amount of time you can. And if you're thinking of doing something in December now, in February, now's the time to start. Don't start in June or July. You can start in June or July, but it just gives you 5 months less preparation time. And what's the impact of that? The impact of that is that you'll get to the race probably 20% less prepared than you would have had you started earlier. So for someone to say, 13 or 14 weeks time, I want to do an Ironman, and when I start digging deep, I'm not going to say straight away and slam the door on that person saying, you got to be kidding. It's just not possible. So I need to find out about where they're at with their fitness. What have they been doing in the past? Are they an experienced endurance athlete? So all those questions I'm trying to find out in our interview before I agree to work with Mitch. And they're the things that we discussed in that initial conversation. And I loved his attitude was, you just tell me what to do and I'll do it. I'm on board with whatever you tell me. I've started a 20-week program. I'm 6 weeks into it, and I don't really trust it, and I don't really have anybody to communicate with about how I'm feeling and whether I should be doing this session today or should I have a recovery day because I'm feeling really tired and I'm not coping with the load. I just need guidance. So I know it's late. You admitted all that. And I know you don't like doing this, but if you'd really take me on board, I will follow whatever you say to the letter. And I'm not going to do a version of it. You got to trust that I'm on board with it. So he talked me into it, to be fair, and sentences like, I'm going to do it anyway, whether you help me or not. I just can't let anybody go into a race and have a bad experience. I'm just going to stop them from doing that, because if I can help them for a minute or 10 minutes or 10 days or 10 months, at least I'm going to give them some advice. And so, all the time I said, the problem is when you don't give yourself enough time, you have to go too quick with the progression. And that's the main thing that we're against, is the quicker you go with the progression, the more risks you take. And what do I mean by that? The more risks you take are the potential to get really sick because your immune system's so on the brink because you're training so much hours, plus you've got work. And don't forget, he's a tradesman and he works physically on his job, and he's got his own business. And the job he has is very physical and it is tiring, and he's on houses, on roofs, and this is a factor that has to be taken into consideration. The fatigue that he's going to accumulate doing his really physical job and trying to train for an Ironman in such a short space of time. So that's what we're always worried about is, are you not going to be able to cope with the load, and is your immunity going to be compromised and you get sick? And then if you progress too quickly if your longest ride's 2 hours and you're aiming for a 6-hour ride, do you have enough weekends in 13 weeks, 13 weekends to do a 2 or 3 hour ride all the way up to a 6-hour ride? Is that enough time to progress slowly? And why do you have to progress slowly? Because we don't want your body to really get run down. And then you could get injured from that. So getting sick is one thing, but getting injured from overuse, being in a position that you're not used to. Your body's not used to sitting in a time trial position for that long. When you haven't been doing this sport for very long, you haven't even had a time trial bike. Now you've got a time trial bike, and you're changing position from what you've been used to riding on a road bike. So all these things have to be taken into consideration. Your body has to be able to cope with the changes and adapt, and that's a progression that we work on. And if you give someone 6 months or 12 months to do that, the body doesn't even notice the little changes in the duration and the intensity that you're giving it. But when you're doing it over 12 weekends, and that's literally what you have, because you've got the race week, that's 1 week, one weekend. You've got the taper week, that's another one. So out of 14 weeks, you've really got 12 weekends to get from, a 90-minute run to a 4 hour or 3.5 hour run on race day, and a possible 3 hour longest ride you've done to a 5.5 to 6 hour ride on race day. So it's a big progressive step. So it's once I explained all that to him, and he wasn't going to take no for an answer. So it was okay. Let's go. Let's start the process. And obviously we have to actually find out where your level is. So we have to test you in the first week. So straight away we're losing sessions that might be useful for your preparation for an endurance event like an Ironman. We're already, having to compromise straight away. So that's how it started.
And so it turns out he did get injured. He got injured for running. So pretty much straight away, you had to completely change his Ironman program to swim or ride. And so suddenly you're against a whole bunch of hurdles because, one, you've got a short time to prepare for an Ironman, but two, now you can't even prepare for the marathon and running. So let's talk about the training, and what were you focused on with him? What was your goal? What was your intention, especially once he couldn't run? How did you approach the training?
Yeah, and that was disappointing. There's no doubt about it, and that was one of my big fears when we started. And it started off okay. He got a month's worth of training, but as I said before, because we were trying to progress his duration, possibly too quickly, and you hope that he can cope with that, but as it turned out, his legs couldn't, and so we had to completely change our mindset to, okay, we're going to really use this negative and turn it into a positive, and you're going to be, one of the best prepared bike riders that's ever entered a first up Ironman. And so we really concentrated on that, and we really switched to a swim bike program, and he was doing the rehab. He had to rest first before he could do any rehab, and then we really had to be careful not to up the load on his bike as well. So we got a lot more recovery style riding in just to get the blood flow around, and concentrated more on getting his FTP up with some threshold and some VO2 work, and then really working on the weekend to get his ride duration up. And it wasn't about riding fast. It was about spending time in the saddle as long as he could, and using Saturday and Sunday. And to add to this, he's a really good stand-up paddle racer, and he races every Saturday morning. So that's something that he wanted to keep doing, and they're very competitive nationally, and his team, they race as a team. So we had to fit that in as well. So and that's normal in every program. People have got things that they want to keep doing, but the priority is that you've selected an event that's pretty monumental, and we do have a lot of people flippantly on Instagram talk about anybody can do an Ironman. Well, I just don't agree. Anybody can to a point, but it's how well you do it is what we're on about. Getting through it isn't kind of the only thing that you should be trying to do. You should be getting through it proud and satisfied, rather than I ended up walking for half an hour, but I still got it. I just proved that I could do it. That's not how we want to do it. We want to do it where you're totally prepared, so you can, if you have to run for 50% and you have to walk for 50%, but you still end up running properly, throughout the day. That's a better way that you're able to sustain, your ultimate goals, which is not to just exist in an Ironman and just get through it. And so that's the main thing that we wanted to get across to him. And, during that period where he was injured, we switched our mindset to, okay, you're going to do a lot more bike riding. It doesn't have to be harder, but it just has to be more duration so that we'll get a lot of the cardio stuff from the intensity on the bike during the week, but we'll get the endurance into your body from the weekends, longer rides. And if we get in the hills and you do a fair bit of standing up and longer steady climbs, it will help your legs be strong enough so that when they do come to run, you'll have that endurance load in your legs from the bike. And as it proved out in the end, that's actually what happened. And his bike riding went through the roof. We've got a lot of details that we can show you about his progression. But that's kind of how we switched our mindset from turning a negative into a positive and making sure that his swimming was up to scratch and that he was getting the endurance and the intensity on the bike, so that when he went to run, cardiovascularly, he would be really fit to run. It would just be, could his legs, the muscles and bones in his legs, cope with the landing load the impact that running has.
And I guess it was a pretty heavy swim and bike program. Once he was able to start running, I think he basically couldn't start running until 4 weeks out from the race, which, as a coach, that just makes you so nervous because, we want our athletes to be 12 weeks out, almost, marathon base ready. We want them to be in that position where they've already got multiple 2+ hour runs under their belt, and they can cope with big, long 2 to 2.5 hour runs with no problem. And that way, in this last phase, we can give them extended running ready for the marathon and Ironman that they can cope with. And so to get 4 weeks out off an injury underdone is a pretty nerve-wracking time. So, what was the thought process with his running in that final month leading into the race?
Yeah, we had lots of good discussions, and when we started running, we had to actually make sure that we weren't going to injure him straight away. So we just couldn't throw him into, 60, 70, 80-minute long runs. We had to start with, some really shorter runs and 20, 30 minutes and 40 minutes, and just every second day, just try to get him to run every second day and not worry about the long run being on the weekend, but just add time every second day. So that's kind of how it looked. And then we were able to reduce the bike time, duration on the bike spent in training, and substitute that with some running. And we couldn't really test to see where his level was because that would risk injuring him and would give too much fatigue from a high-intensity 5K or 10K run. It would create too much fatigue, therefore he wouldn't be able to train for running again because he'd be probably a little bit sore from running too hard because he had 4 weeks off. We had to be very careful about. And so you're really almost going into the race not knowing what pace he could do because you hadn't tested that over a long time and you hadn't tested it in a 5 or 10 or a half marathon. So they're the indicators that we always use when we go into a race. What's your current data? What's your testing tell us? What have you been able to do as a run off the bike? What have you been able to do as a half marathon fresh or a 10K or a 5K fresh? So all these indicators weren't available. So that for us was a little bit of a worry, but we know that every bit of advice we've ever given any athlete that joins Trivelo is the one thing we want you to know is whether you're in a training session, whether you're in a testing session, or whether you're in a race, you should follow the same theory, which is start conservatively, build your session, your training session, race or testing session, build it so that you're able to finish off just as strong as you started. So if you have that theory and that concept going into an Ironman, that you're going to be very conservative and you're going to really protect yourself. And then as the risk gets less, and what do I mean by that? Well, if you start in the first 5 or 10 or 15K, there's still a huge risk if you start running faster, because you've still got 30K left or 35K left. But if you get to 30K, you've only got 12K left. If you get to 35K, you've got 7K left. The risk is much less. And the chances of you running fast are really slim anyway, because you're probably at a pace that you can only cope with. So to come home stronger is a little bit fictitious in anybody's mind. And we still have a lot of people saying, I'll bring it home in an Ironman or I'll run faster. And, we just say that's just not going to happen. You're going to get to a running pace and your job is to hold it. Hold on to that pace and not fade. And that's how we planned his run on the day based on what we were doing in that last 4 weeks, which is just progressing his duration each week. So, the first week it would be, 20K, then we try to do 30, then 40, then 50, so that, by the time he gets to race week, he's had 4 weeks of really consistent running where his body's used to the pounding effect again. We haven't run fast. We haven't done any intervals, intensity. We haven't done anything long to create any fatigue, but we've gradually got his body used to the running action and especially off the bike as well. He got used to that. So we did some marathon paced and we gave him a big range to see what he felt comfortable with. So by the time we got to the race, he'd done a couple of marathon pace runs off the bike where he got to feel what it felt like to run at 5:10 or 5:20 or 5:30 pace. And, the question was, well, how much longer can you hold that for? Because that was all unknown.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we hadn't had a chance to do that because of the injury. So that was our strategy.
Yeah, and it turns out he was true to his word. He turned out to be a great guy just overall, but a great athlete, and he absolutely nailed the training. And you love the fact that he went headfirst into the swim and bike while he couldn't run. And I think you were so stoked with the preparation because you just said, well, he couldn't have trained any better for the bike, and then he did all he could in that last month for the run, and then it was coming to the race. So it's a race plan is nerve-wracking for any race, and it's the most nerve-wracking, I think, for the Ironman. It's such a big event. It's such a long day out there, and then it's even more nerve-wracking if you don't even know how you're going to cope with the marathon. And so knowing you can cope with the swim and bike is a pretty good position to be in. But how did you approach the race plan? What was your confidence in his ability to get through the marathon?
Yeah, so we got him to such a really good level as a swimmer that he could cope with the duration of the event, and he could cope easily with the bike. That was really a positive. And I think he rode 5 hours 20 on a day. Mm-hmm. I think he's probably a 5:05, 5:10 rider. Mm-hmm. And our strategy was, the opposite to what most people logically would think. Well, I've got really poor running form because of my training. Let's just make as much time up as we can on the swim and the bike. And we did the opposite. We just said, let's just be very disciplined and conservative. And so the bike feels like you've really not hurt yourself. And then you'll be able to get off and you'll be able to run consistently because your fatigue levels will be so low. As if you'd ridden 15 minutes faster. And I think he ended up running 3:30. I don't actually have that data, but I think that's
3:46. I think it was
3:40, was it? 3:40 something. Yep. So
3:42.
Yeah, I think he is a capable runner of a 3:30, and he wasn't that far away, and I was trying to get him to think like a 3:50 to 4 hour runner, and in the first 10-15K, and just try to be as conservative as you can. And just keep stressing that being conservative is going to pay dividends in the long run. You'll be able to run the whole way, even though you haven't run this distance. In terms of time, I shouldn't say distance. You haven't run the time in training, and we don't expect to run 42K in training. We expect to run some time where we're running slower in our training than we would on race day. So the time's important. So, getting to run 3 hours or 2.5 hours or split runs where you're running 2.5 hours in the morning and an hour in the afternoon when you're getting a total duration of 3.5 hours. So we didn't get a chance to do any of that. But in the end of the day, it was really about his discipline in not extending himself too much the whole day. And sure, we may not get the fastest time, but in fact we did. We got a really good time. But, he is capable of, now we know he's capable of probably 20 or 30 minutes quicker. So that was exciting for his first race to be disciplined, to stay with the structure, stay with the schedule, and it paid dividends because he could not have been happier at the end. It was like, oh, damn it, I think I could have gone harder. And I don't have many people say that. And he did a 10:30 something. And I think the goal was to break 11 hours originally. He absolutely smashed it. And with limited time and with an injury, it was just ridiculous. And that's why I wanted to get this podcast across, because it wasn't smooth. There was everything was wrong. The preparation time we talk about plan, prepare, perform in our motto. You know, planning is don't start with 14 weeks to go for an Ironman.
Please don't take that message from us that we're saying it's okay to do this. It's really, we want it to be one-off, so we don't. It's really uncomfortable. You know?
Yeah, we're not saying this because that's what we want everybody to do. Yeah. We're saying this because that's what we want no one else to ever do. And we want you to give yourself ample time so you can actually probably get the time you want on race day. And even though he's ecstatic to actually finish the event and finish it full of running, and I think he only faded like 5 or 10 seconds per K over the second half of the race, which is pretty phenomenal. So his execution was bloody impressive, to be honest. So yeah, I was probably more relieved and excited for him than I've ever been for any athlete, because it was like, this could go horribly wrong. We haven't had enough time to do this, and you've been injured, and we haven't got really good data to give you a decent race plan around, and we have to ask you to ride more conservatively than you want to. And, you know, I'm saying to him, you're going to find it like, you're going to say, Gerard, what are you doing? This is too easy the whole way around, because it, you know, it is a level that he could cope with no problem. And I'm so impressed with the way he's stuck to and his discipline. That's the thing I loved about Mitch, and the way he just, you know, he just trusted the process.
Yeah, look, I think that watching you as a coach, it's so fun on Ironman Day, and just like you don't have favorite athletes, you don't have favorite races, but I think you definitely light up the most on Ironman Day. There's just something special about the Ironman and the monstrosity of it, and it seriously doesn't diminish, you know, any other race, any other 70.3. You light up just as much, but I think you were anxious about this one, and to see his result, and for him to go in with the goal of breaking 11 hours, his first goal for an Ironman, and to see him get through it really well and do 10 hours, 28 minutes. You were just equally relieved and ecstatic. And I think that on some of the data points, you know, to be able to not basically equal split the marathon, you know, it was a 150 first half and 152 second half, you know, 2 minutes slower in that second half is just pretty awesome. But the key power points I wanted to point out were, you know, he rode 5 hours, 20 minutes, and he averaged 191 watts when, in your own words, he really wasn't a proper bike rider by any means, or a bike rider at all when he came to the program. In fact, his first 20-minute test, this is really important, was 228 watts. You know, that's for 20 minutes. And then for 180 kilometers, you know, 14 weeks later, for 5 hours, 20 minutes, he's on 190 watts. That is an incredible improvement and percentage of, that was his best 20-minute effort at 228 watts. So his execution was really quite good and conservative, as you said, but I think you were just really glad that when we talk about some of the big red flags that an athlete might have, he had all three. It was not enough time to prepare, not enough data to know how he's going to execute and therefore come up with a race plan. And then there's the actual execution itself as well. And so what this kind of proves is, we're not trying to say you can do an Ironman in 14 weeks, but for most people, they have zero of those three things. They don't give themselves enough time. They're not doing the required training in terms of distance and volume and specific sessions that will get them ready for Ironman, and they don't have a race plan. So what this kind of shows is that if you just have a couple of those things, you can really work and use that to your advantage if you're smart about it, and if you have the right race plan, if you just can get enough volume, at least in the swim and bike. That really proved that for us. And ideally, you know, the reason we want athletes to give us 6 months minimum, probably 12 months for an Ironman, 6 months at an absolute minimum, is because we want to have all these three things covered. We want to have enough time to progress them safely and properly. We want to be able to give them the right amount of volume in the training session, and we want to be able to have a great, confident race plan that we can execute, and we know we can execute based on their data on race day. That's the dream, and that's the best way to ensure you're going to get the result you want. And I think this just shows, even if you have a little bit of those things, you can get a good result, but, you know, ideally you have them all.
Yeah, but I think the main thing, Jordy, is all those things you've said are true, and we want to emphasize those points. But if you actually have guidance that's going to allow you to give your best effort on the day and not have an ego to say, well, I'm better than this on the bike, I should be able to ride 5 hours 05 or 5 hours, you could have ended up running 4 hours 20 rather than 3 hours 40 because you're so exhausted from the bike that your body is really breaking down. You know, you burnt so much more fuel. You've raced at a higher heart rate. You know, your lactate levels, you know, where it shouldn't be because you've really raced the bike, trying to get back time. And that scenario doesn't work. We've had so many examples of guys who've tried to do that. And don't forget, on that day we had Stevie Mack rode a 4 hour 40. We had Fiona Mann riding right in her lane, and we had Reese also doing exactly the same. So all 4 athletes that day rode exactly how they wanted to in their ranges, including Mitch, and then all 4 athletes ran properly, and they all got a result they wanted, but they all came into that race with different preparation. And you know, you've got someone like Stevie Mack, who's a world champion, who's, you know, doing a 9 hour Ironman, you know, so you've got that level, and you've got, you know, Mitch who's trying to do his first one. It was Stevie's first one, but he's not racing it, he's trying to get through it as properly as he can. Stevie's racing it, so they're different mindsets, and they're different strategies and different plans, and that's the message we're trying to get across. If Mitch had gone in with, I'll just try to catch up, he would have had an awful time on the run. I've got no doubt about it. Underdone, underprepared, rode too hard, and then couldn't run because he ran out of fuel. His body couldn't cope with it. Mm-hmm. His heart rate was elevated. You know, it was a pretty tough day wind-wise. So it could have been disastrous. And it sounds like, oh, yeah, that was pretty straightforward. But that's why it was straightforward, because he did all the things right. He did it all well. He listened and followed the instructions and stayed in his ranges and didn't have an ego and saying, I can do faster than this. Which we know he can. But it would have impacted detrimentally on his running. And therefore, the day would have been spoiled. The minute you have a terrible one leg out of the 3, it really spoils the whole day. Because you're not happy, you know. And that day, the swim was horrendous. It was the worst wind. Guys were taking 10, 15 minutes more than they normally would have. And the bike was pretty tough. And for anybody who knows Busso, it's a flat course, but it's got so many turns when you change directions. And then the run is, you know, quite tough because it's really windy on that day. So you've got headwind, tailwind the whole day. So yeah, even though it's a fast course, that particular day, it was probably the worst conditions they'd had in years for wind. So you have to take all those things into consideration, and the outcome is just absolutely tremendous. And that's why I really wanted to do a case study on someone like that who didn't get all the planning preparation and execution right, but he did get the execution right. He did get the planning right, and once we established that once you've got a set amount of time, then you can get the planning right. And, you know, whether you get 14 weeks or whether you get, you know, 36 weeks, you've got to manage the planning around those weeks you have available and try to fit in the appropriate training into those weeks. And I think that's what Mitch and our coaching group did really well.
And one of the best things to finish off that you've really enjoyed is he's just kept going from there, and he's kept training, and he's absolutely flying. And since then, he's just done 312 watts for a 20-minute test. So that is a massive improvement from where he started. And yeah, you're just very happy as a coach that he's continued on. He's kept up the consistency, and he's really reaping the benefits now, and he's going to keep reaping the benefits, and he'll race even better with continued training.
And don't forget, it was only, you know, August when he started, so he's doing 228 watts in August, and here he is now, you know, 312 watts. I don't know, August, September, October, November, December, January. It's like 6 months later, he's improved nearly 90 watts. And that shows you, if you stay consistent, have the appropriate rest after the Ironman. And I'm having to force him to rest. He's saying, let's get going. You know, I'm so excited about my performance. I can't wait to start the next program. When are we starting? And I'm saying, you just need to have a rest. And I don't mean rest as in stop training. Yeah. You know, let's just recover in your training like we advise, and give you the recovery sessions and follow this. And Mitch has done exactly the same thing. He's followed the instructions the right way in recovery, and now he's able to, in February, you know, I think, what was his January FTP? It was 290 something, I think. I don't know.
So his 20-minute number was 312, so it gives you an FTP of 296.
Yep. And in January, what was his number?
Sorry, that was the last test, yeah.
Okay, sorry, that was the last test. Yep. So I know that he's testing again this week, which is going to be exciting to see where he's at in terms. And look, his speed now is at over 40 k's an hour for that 300 watts. So, when he first started, I think he was mid 35 k's an hour. So he's really improved incredibly. He's literally 5 k's an hour faster than he was over 20 minutes. So.
We've probably jumped the gun a little bit, recording this episode today. He's literally doing his FTP test tomorrow, but yes. I'll put in the description notes, once this episode is live, I'll put in the description notes what he ended up with his permission, with his FTP test tomorrow, so you can see the comparison. Yeah,
and we actually will get to see him do a run test, which will be interesting. So look, I'm so pleased that he's continued, and now because he's consistently in the program, he's now, he started at a level of 3 out of 10. He built up to Ironman to a 4 or 5, and he's recovered, and just stayed at 5, and now he's at 6 and heading to 7. And, if he continues on that journey over the next 2 years, who knows what he can do somewhere in the 9 for an Ironman. And that's exciting for him, but he knows it'll take time. But he's not having this period where he's off for 6 months and having to come back and then starting back at 3 or 4 and getting super frustrated because his numbers are well down on what they were and felt like he didn't lose much fitness, but the numbers don't lie. That continuous consistency of training is the key, and the stop-start stuff is what prevents you from the improvement you want. You want that progression. You don't want to keep getting to a good point, then regressing, and then getting back to that good point, but taking time off in between, because that you're just yo-yoing up and down. You're not actually getting any improvement. So we say that a lot, but it's so obvious, and we still have athletes that are doing it, and they get frustrated with themselves, But we have to keep pointing out, well, that's a decision you make when you decide to do that. So that's it, I think. That's a good conclusion to this episode, and we hope you enjoyed it. And if anyone thinking about an Ironman, keep these points in mind. And if you'd like to get the same level of coaching, if you're thinking about an Ironman or any race, and you want help with your preparation, although please don't leave it too late. If you've got a race coming up, get onto us as soon as possible. Don't leave it another month, because the longer you wait, the less training you have and the less weeks you have available. So you can go to trivelocoaching.com.au and apply to be coached there. A reminder that we coach athletes from Australia, but also all around the world and internationally. And we have a 8-week guarantee that if you don't improve in the first 8 weeks, then the coaching is on us. So that's it for this case study episode. Thanks as always for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.